Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon, where we are starting the fifth story of Doctor Who, which is The Keys of Marinus, with Episode 1, The Sea of Death. The first thing that strikes you is that this is the first episode of Doctor's history to be written by a returning author. Terry Nation is writing his second script for the series. So let's see if it'll be interesting to see if he can do it actually better than his first script, which was a pretty good script, had some problems. And let's be honest, The Sea of Death is a pretty promising start for the Keys of Marinus. The first thing that you notice is that a lot of this episode has a lot of really good special effects work done on it. Well, good. It's not modern by any means, but you see the TARDIS actually materialize, whereas there's just been some simple crossfades for it dematerializing in other episodes. The model work, just looking at the island, looks really, really good. Even though there's a weirdness with the title being set at the bottom of the screen instead of the middle, which I just find that kind of an odd decision overall. And I also have to say that a lot of there's effects work where at the end where everyone disappears to the next location, and that's actually done with a special effect. It's the first real sort of effect done in the studio, which is it's easy to see how they do it. It's obviously a split screen, but it's still a pretty decent split screen effect that just sort of works to make the Doctor and co disappear and then reappear, which is what you really need for this. Overall, the plot of this episode is it's very much the setup. Let's set up the adventure, set the central premise, whereas this one's going to be, much like Marco Polo was a series of sort of journeys, this one's going to be another series of journeys, but more sci-fi oriented, as the Doctor, Ian, Barbara, and Susan have to find these four microcircuits, which are the titular keys of Marinus, because the time has come to try to make this big thing called the Contents of Marinus work again, and basically bring peace and prosperity back to the planet, which is a very, very good premise for a story. It'll probably get us to basically the next few episodes are gonna be all about going to these 4 different locations and just trying to find these keys, which will be pretty interesting to see. It's a good way to flesh out sort of the universe and just maybe tell a bunch of mini stories, and hopefully it'll keep me engaged. There are a couple of problems with this episode. First off, I don't just say William Hartnell as the Doctor is the Doctor. This is the first time where I really see that he is acting sort of more like he's much closer to the character that we know. He still isn't quite there because he still won't help out because someone needs Arbitan obviously needs help. But he's at a point where he's nice to his companions and he's traveling for the sake of traveling, and they're exploring and there's no danger and it's just a lot of fun. Which is, I think this is the portrayal of Hartnell that I can really get used to. He's also really funny. Even though Hartnell fluffs his lines, they're just hilarious. Ian, Barbara, and Susan. Ian and Barbara are there really to sort of explain, I guess, the idea of acid and acid sea as a defense barrier. And Susan's there, I guess, she really is kind of a third wheel. They don't have too much going on in between the three of them, but they're still pretty decent. Though I think some of the flaws of this episode are, sadly, the direction leads its way to quite a few bloopers that I feel like could have even been noticed back in 1964 when this originally aired. Mainly because it's like set hands moving things. William Russell at one point misses his mark. Someone, I think it's William Russell, and steps into shot before the camera cuts. Stuff like that. I mean, I get it. They don't have time for a reshoot. But it's things like that really make the episode sort of fall flat. Also, there was 1 or 2 unconvincing models, which just don't really work. And let's be honest, this plot isn't anything special. So, that in mind, even though it's definitely a good start, hopefully the episodes improve a little bit of this, because there's still definitely a lot of room for improvement in storytelling. I'm gonna give The Sea of Death a 7 out of 10. Also, I should probably have mentioned it is currently it's the 9th of May. Yes, it's the 9th of May. So I'll be back tomorrow, the 10th, with episode 2, which is called The Velvet Web. Alright, today is now the 10th of May, 2017, and I just finished watching The Velvet Web, which, just as I predicted, would be taking a very different plot to the first episode, as this one has the Doctor, Ian, and Barbara and Susan finding the first key in the city of Morpheton, which, this is the first time Doctor Who ever really does a story where you have a utopia, but it's secretly a dystopia. This episode in particular seems to take quite a few cues from Brave New World, with all the people conditioned to be happy and to be happy to do their work. It might just be because I just recently read Brave New World that I'm really making the parallels, but I just found it kind of similar. It's also one of the first ones to really have sort of a bug-eyed monster, I guess, with the brains of Morpheton, which, I mean, the props are a little wonky, but the voice is what really sells it. Like, the guy that does the voice of this brain has this very deep inflection that just sort of draws you in, but it also has this sinister quality to it I just really quite like. It's quite an interesting choice of portrayal for these voices. The second thing that strikes you is, even though this story is going to have like 5 episodes worth of sets, this episode in particular seems to have really nice sets, at least nicely done sets, whereas almost on par with the first one, and hopefully the quality of these sets can keep on. I mean, sure, the room where the brain's in is obviously just meant to be just a darkened part of the studio, plus some stuff put up, which kind of works to make the brains look backlit and more sinister, and it just sort of adds to the effect, considering it's in black and white. But overall, just the effects given in these sequences for these sets are pretty good. It was Barry Newberry, I think, who was in charge of doing these sets. And I know he famously says he doesn't like this one, but I say he's wrong. I say that this one is probably really good design work, especially. I also have to say, which I also really like, John Gore's direction. It pulls off a lot of these shifting perspectives from Ian, Susan, and the Doctor seeing the illusion of this beautiful city, which is, I guess, supposed to be the Velvet Web. Because a web made out of velvet wood looks beautiful, but I guess the idea of the title is it looks beautiful, but it's really a web and to catch your people. And Barbara's seeing just for the city for what it is, which it's shot really well. I mean, obviously it was done with recording breaks, but still, just having it shot, the way it's shot just sort of works, and alternating shots. Also, Ian gets hypnotized, and Barbara actually has to save him, so, you know, this is why Barbara is one of the better companions of Doctor Who in general, just because she doesn't care. The Doctor doesn't. This episode really seems just to focus on Barbara. The Doctor is there to give commentary, but he doesn't really do much. He does get some great stuff at the end when he, because it's time for William Hartnell to take his 2-week vacation. He's jumping ahead to 2 sections while everyone else is going on. And what's funny is that he just sort of ditches Susan, which is, I just really like that. It's kind of funny. It's like, no, you'll be fine. I'm just gonna go ahead. It's really showing the Doctor as more the carefree adventurer, which is a portrayal of the character that I really do enjoy overall, because that's really how the character is supposed to be, just this carefree adventure. This episode also introduces 2 characters who will be in the cast for the rest of the story, I guess. Altos and Sabitha, who are, I guess, they're underlings of Arbiton, and it's nice to have a different group. It'll give some different perspectives on how to proceed, and it should make the next few episodes interesting. A couple of problems, of course. First off, I'm not going to take points off of it, but there is one little point where I'll be warned on the DVD. One line obviously comes from a different audio source. I think that's simply because of issues with, probably issues with the tapes, and they just had to redo the line, and they obviously had to just insert it in a reused shot, which, I mean, it took me a little out of the experience. I'm not going to mark it down for that. But I also have to say that this is just a really good sort of overthrowing an empire done in a quick 25 minutes with introducing new characters. But I get it, it's a small budget, but some of the lavishness, like, of the food is done very badly. And apparently they're supposed to be burning the city, but at the end, you can't really tell it all, just because there just isn't any way to tell. They say, oh, it's burning, but it's not like they're backlit or anything, so, the lighting department could have done a bit better there. So, all in all, I think I'm going to have to give The Velvet Web, because it's a genuinely good story with a really, really good plot and finds the keys. Though the cliffhanger doesn't have me bode well for the next episode, which is the Screaming Jungle, because Susan's screaming again, and one of my problems with Susan is that she hasn't really done much. Maybe it'll be a Susan-focused episode next time. I don't know. I hope so, because I'd like to see her get more development along the lines of Marco Polo and the Daleks, and not the Destruction where she's just weird, or an Unearthly Child where she's great until part 2, 3, and 4, where she just evolves into screaming. But that said, I think I'm going to have to give The Velvet Web a total of 9 out of 10, because it is really, really good. It just has the problems, which is sort of, I think that's going to be the theme of this story, where the scores are going to go up and down, so we'll see how that ends. But I'll be back tomorrow with The Screaming Jungle. Before I begin today, I'd like to make a quick correction to yesterday's segment. I mentioned Barry Newberry was the designer for this story. It's actually not. It's Raymond Cusick who did that. He did the other Terry Nation story, The Daleks, so he's a pretty good designer. But anyway, it is the 11th of May, 2017, and I just finished watching The Screaming Jungle, which, after The Velvet Web was a really, really good dystopia story, this one, it really wants to be sort of a tense horror story, but it falls flat on a number of occasions. I mean, the idea is nice, plants coming to life and killing people, so nice that Terry Nation will use it again, and it'll be used in Doctor Who again, not once but twice. So it's not a bad idea. It's just a lot of the writing of this one just falls quite flat. And what I mean by that is actually first and foremost, the character of Susan. Well, she's only in the episode for about half of it before she goes on. All she does for this one is scream, which is just really annoying and brings the whole episode down. You also have Altos and Sabitha who are replacing the Doctor for this one and the next one, but they really don't do anything in this one either. I mean, and even Barbara gives off a couple of screams, which is really out of character for Barbara overall, I would think. She doesn't seem at all like the type to be screaming. I mean, and the only other character is Ian, who acts really over the top and weird in this one. Like, it's really weird. And an old man who, he's okay. I mean, random old guy, I guess, is the best actor in this episode, which is kind of surprising and kind of sad. I do have to say the direction is pretty good, especially considering the jungle set probably is a very small jungle set, just because they're doing this. This story has to be probably a money saver, doing a bunch of six smaller sets in a row, I guess. And I will say that the cliffhanger actually had me more entertained than this episode, because, I mean, just a snowy landscape and they're suffering from hypothermia, much better than just Susan screaming in the middle of a jungle. It just works better as a cliffhanger than the cliffhanger to the previous episode. The music for this one, however, is pretty good. Overall, it's Norman Kay composing the score, who he did in An Unearthly Child, and I think this might be his better of the two scores. I don't know, unless, of course, they're the same score, but I doubt it. There's also a big plot hole. The old man says, Arbatan would have told you about the traps, and they act like he did, except he didn't. That was never mentioned. And you think he would mention, like, hey, on the third one, there's gonna be this old guy, he's got a bunch of traps, just be aware. Be wary of it. But no traps mentioned, just surprise traps. Which is weird. It's really weird, and also, you have this idol, which pivots, but the arms are like human arms, and they're like right underneath the actor's butts, which is really funny. I'm just waiting for the slip. I don't ever do slip, but it would be just funny to watch. So really, that's really got me more entertained. So this was really it wasn't bad. I think it was probably you could classify it as a bad episode. I mean, it's not the worst thing ever, but it's definitely a very, very large dip in quality. I'm gonna give The Screaming Jungle a 4 out of 10. And I'll be back tomorrow with the Keys of Marinus with hopefully a better episode with The Snows of Terror. Alright, hello ladies and gentlemen, it is the 11th? Yes, the 11th of May. Yeah, the 11th of May. No, it's the 12th. Yesterday was the 11th. It's the 12th of May, 2017, and I just finished watching The Snows of Terror, which is the 4th episode of The Keys of Marinus, and the final episode that does not feature the Doctor in it, as this one, actually, it's already, just from the opening shot, and the opening scenes, it's a extreme improvement over The Screaming Jungle, because we're back to a really pretty decent quality. We have Ian and Barbara lost on a mountainside, where in a snowstorm they get sent to this hunter's hut. They get picked up, and this hunter, he's ready to attack Barbara, and he's just a really creepy guy. He's our primary antagonist. The key's in a block of ice, guarded by four ice knights, I guess you could say. And it's a pretty interesting. It's a really, really good setup. I have to say most of the episode is dedicated just to finding the key and then getting the end. There are, however, a couple of problems that I will get out of the way real quickly, and they do impact the episode quite a bit. The big one is that what is it? It's there's this chase scene from running away from these ice knights, which it's just badly directed. I get it, you have limited sets and you can't have limited cameras. I just think it could have been done slightly better. It's just not a very good chase overall, in my opinion. And I think, I have to say some of the costuming. I mean, Altos' costume, how is he not changed? How is he not free? He should be dead. He's not wearing pants, and it's extremely freezing. He should have died from exposure and hypothermia by now. Though it's great to see that the villain actually gets himself killed at the end, just before the company leave, it's a very, very satisfying moment, because he's creepy. He wants to just kill our 5 main characters. Again, Susan doesn't do much but scream, which is a shame. But other than that, the episode was really, really solid. So I think I'll have to give The Snows of Terror a 8 out of 10, because there were a couple of flaws, big flaws. But I'm looking forward to tomorrow night with Sentence of Death. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is now the 13th of May, 2017, and I just finished watching Sentence of Death, which whereas we've had a lot of different episodes. We've had a story in the snow, a sort of sci-fi story in the jungle, and a dystopian story. This one decides to be a courtroom drama. Basically, the resolution of the cliffhanger is Ephraim, who is a friend of Altos and Arbitan's and Sabithas, is dead. Someone has stolen the key, and they think Ian did it. And they think Ian killed Ephraim. But there's no proof. And this is a city while it's highly civilized, it uses guilty until proven innocent, which, while people say it's civilized, I think that's more of a barbaric practice, if you ask me, because you really shouldn't assume guilt without any evidence. But still, and this episode is basically the reappearance of the Doctor, who acts as lawyer and detective, as we figure out that it was actually one of the guards who did it, but he has an accomplice, and the cliffhanger is that the accomplice has kidnapped Susan and is going to kill her if Ian, Barbara, and the Doctor reveal where the real key is hidden. So this episode, it has a good feel of just trying to figure out a mystery. Um, a lot of the sets are a bit lackluster, though. I find, especially the set of the actual courtroom. It just seems kind of bland. Obviously, they're running out of budget by this point, so I'm not going to take too much off for it, but there is enough to give just a little bit of pause because, well, everything's kind of blank. And some of the courtroom stuff it just isn't really realistic, but it's still a lot of fun. I mean, William Hartnell himself really, really sells this episode, as he's trying to save Ian, who I'm guessing he figures out is at least a friend in this one, just because they have a nice working relationship with each other, and it's actually pretty good. Susan, of course, only acts as a plot device, which is becoming normal, which is kind of sad. But Barbara at least has time to shine, along with Altus and Sabitha, so they more than make up for a lot of Susan's faults. Some moments I love the judges in this one. The judge on the when you're looking at the screen on the left, it just has these amazing facial expressions, which they could be made into a meme. They're so comedically funny, and they just do this weird nodding thing that they do. And the cliffhanger is actually really, really scary because, Susan is in danger and Ian is going to be executed. So there really isn't a happy ending in sight for the TARDIS team in this one. It really it seems like everything's going to fall apart and this could be the end. Well, it's not. I mean, the next episode is the keys. And of course, it's really trying to find the final key, which oddly enough, this episode is actually called The Keys of Marinus, which is kind of weird. But all in all, this was a really, really quite a good courtroom drama. William Hartnell does play detective really, really well. And it makes a lot of sense, even if some of the evidence is a bit unorthodox to prove anything. And I mean, it makes sense that Ian would still be sentenced to death. So I think I'm going to give Sentence of Death. I think it was just as good as the last one. And it seems like we're going to go to a pretty decent conclusion. So Sentence of Death is going to get an 8 out of 10 from me. Thanks for watching. I'm going to stop the recording there, and tomorrow will be the final episode, The Keys of The Keys of Marinus, the titular The Keys of Marinus. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is now the 14th of May, 2017, and I just finished watching The Keys of Marinus, which is, oddly enough, the title of the 6th episode of the story, The Keys of Marinus. This one, I hate to say it doesn't give it the story nearly as satisfactorily of a conclusion as I would like it. It's not a bad episode by any means. The Screaming Jungle is still the weakest of this serial's lot of 6 episodes, but it's an episode that just it doesn't really know what it wants to be. Half of it is a conclusion to the previous episode's plotline with Ian being cleared of murder and them getting the key and escaping, and the other half is defeating the Vord, who the Vord are not a credible threat at all. It's obvious that they're just men in suits, and while yes, the audios and comics will do some interesting things with the Vord overall, this episode doesn't do too much to make them at all any sort of a threat, and really they just don't have any sort of personality as villains overall for the episode. So, that being said, there's some things to like. William Hartnell as the Doctor is he's really, really good in this story overall. This episode in particular, at the end, he gives Sabitha these words of advice, and the way he just sort of is morose about Ian going to his death is really it's just some powerful stuff overall, because you really can see that the Doctor is now starting to care about his companions more, which I really, really like. So you just have some great performances overall from Hartnell, who is really trying his best to make the Doctor feel, I guess he makes the Doctor feel more human. Carolyn Ford as Susan doesn't do too much, and Jacqueline Hill's Barbara Wright actually does some interesting stuff. She picks up a knife and is she's ready to go stab some Ford. That doesn't happen, sadly, but it's a pretty good image all the same, for Barbara as a companion. But yeah, the plot sort of meanders to a conclusion with Yartek, the leader of the Vord, deciding, "Oh, I'm just gonna insert all these keys," and it only really is resolved because Ian intentionally gives the guy a fake key, one of the fake key from episode 3, which kind of sad that comes back to. I mean, I get it. It makes sense that it would come back to play. It's just kind of weird, in my opinion, overall, for that to happen. So, I think, that being said, I'm gonna have to take all my reservations about the Keys of Maris episode 6, which is the Keys of Maris, and give it it wasn't bad. I'm gonna give it a straight 5 out of 10, because it's kind of just an average meh conclusion to an otherwise pretty decent story. That being said, with each episode getting their individual score, adds up the Keys of Marinus' total score to 6.83 out of 10, making it, well, out of the 5 Doctor Who Hartnell stories, the third best Hartnell story. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again in a couple of days when we go to the next televised story, which is The Aztecs.